Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to the Stellar Cyber for SOC Analyst class. If you wish to contact Stellar Cyber, the best email is training@stellarcyber.ai. Some additional resources for everyone. We do have a support website. If you are a customer of Stellar Cyber or a customer of a partner, these resources are available for everyone. We have a FAQ section. We have a community section. Please go to stellarcyber.zendesk.com, the URL presented, and register so that you can find additional information beyond just this class and beyond just what is in, we call it our knowledge base, and that is our documentation. So the three sources of information are the knowledge base, which is documentation available on the system. We have the FAQs on the support site and the community section on the support site. So please go register to get access to all the additional information that is being updated quite regularly. But let us just dive right in. Some background of how security operation centers have been developing over 20 years at least, if not 30 years. One aspect of our business of quote unquote cybersecurity is that, the way things have been built up, we have been making a lot of silos in our infrastructure because originally all security was physical access, right? If you had a computer, the only way to attack the computer was to get physical access to the building where the computer existed. And then we networked the computers. As computers became more mainstream, we started sharing floppy disks and we had viruses, if you remember the 80s, right? Antivirus was created. That has a whole 30, 40-year history. We created firewalls and ACLs. And in the 90s, we had these different teams in different organizations, depending on how big your organization was, government versus non-government. But commonly, there was the networking team, and there was the workstation team, and there was also a security team charged with trying to secure everything. And everyone was looking at different metrics and different requirements, right? So the first answer was a security operations center. If you think back to especially the late 90s and 2000s, we had some of these initial products like the security incident management, security event management. These were joined into the security incident and event management. And this was our first attempt as an overall group of practitioners and managers to build a single pane of glass to try and bring together the reality of this now networked world where all these different networks were connecting together. And to be completely honest, this was largely government, military, information technology. They were the ones building up from their earlier security expertise where they were securing locations and some classic telecommunications to this new networked age. Now, the issue with dealing with especially larger organizations is that we wound up with a lot of documents and a lot of definitions and a lot of different processes that were being brought together that assumed that there would be a lot of people. And now in 2020, 2022, well, longer than that, but we're trying to, be more efficient and bring new technologies also to deal with the threat that's coming in from, many smaller actors. So one thing we have to talk about is what is security operations? We have a center for it. What does it mean? So security operations is about monitoring security, key function. And if there is an incident, how are we going to track the incident and see what's going on? On a completely separate note, there is also vulnerability management for the various pieces of software and systems that are connected to different networks that are trying to, that we're trying to protect. And this is one mechanism that has been added to security operations. And there's also infrastructure. There are the routers and switches that can be attacked in various different ways, right? So the Security Operations Center is the center that does all of these things, but they also need to monitor the overall environment. So in some organizations, Security Operations Center also means physical security. Frequently details about what actors are out there, the threat reports about what actors are attacking different organizations. I know there is a threat intelligence feed that takes care of actors who are somewhat specifically attacking financial institutions in a particular region that are very, very relevant to that region, but not necessarily to other regions. So the various threat reports and threat intelligence, which is its whole big picture. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Another aspect of this process was very quickly, there was a continuous improvement component added to Security Operations Center. We're going to have to constantly improve what defenses we have, how do we control what's going on. Security Operations Centers cover not just what is happening right now, but looking into the past and seeing what happened in the past, or looking into a specific compromised machine or set of machines and figure out exactly what had happened. So forensics was brought in to the role and responsibilities of the Security Operations Center. And then finally, overall reporting, because large organizations need reports in order to keep functioning. Let us fast forward to 2018, and the US NIST organization created a cybersecurity framework. And basically, the point here is that planning is essential. There is a famous quote, planning is essential, plans are useless. As soon as the real world happens, you need to be able to pivot, but the act of planning is useful in order to figure out what you might do in different scenarios, and it can be difficult to follow every plan exactly because the adversaries always throw you a loop. So the different steps, the first step we have to do is identify what we are protecting and what the rules around what we are protecting. Part of this is IT stuff that I'm personally more familiar with, seeing what the assets are, what their versions are. Some of this gets into the vulnerability scanning, but no less important, we have to look at business environments. What business are we in? What kind of threats do we need to pay attention to? What kind of rules that law enforcement in our area has to care with? This is all about the much larger topic of risk assessment, risk management, and a strategy to deal with those things. Next, we need to develop protections. So these are your firewalls, installing clients onto your various devices, your EDR clients. But they also include some processes in terms of new hire employee and what we do when an employee leaves the organization, defining those processes so that the overall system is going to work. They also include awareness, phishing awareness, other security awareness. This also includes that always repeated but frequently ignored request, don't let someone follow you on your key card. If you have a key card into the building, that other person has to show their key card. I'm just pointing out how this has been going on for a good 20 years, like my entire career in cybersecurity. These are practices. They are still some of the easiest ways in which attackers attack our organizations. And what can we do as security practitioners to deal with it? In this framework defined by NIST, awareness training is a part of this implementing protections. I saw a question come in. I mentioned monitoring monitor security by the Security Operations Center, but not threat monitoring. All right, let's go take a look at that slide real quick. I was trying to indicate that and threat reports. So it's obviously going to vary. Now, here's where we come out to reality. Some organizations, based on a variety of factors, may decide that as part of their protect scheme, they will not assign personnel to monitor specific threat feeds, right? And then other organizations will spend a whole lot of time doing that. And, that's all the dark web this and, getting in. And there's a lot there. It's not really in the product for Stellar Cyber. We have our threat intel feeds in, but we rely on the expertise of others for some of those things. And also some of our customers purchase products from other organizations that are doing that very specific niche access. So it gets really, really complicated, and we need to talk about specifics. The short answer, now that I've given you the long answer, is that based on your planning, threat reports might be something that your particular security operations center will be doing. And for others, it will be information coming in that they are monitoring, right? Then, well, is monitoring the right word? They are consuming. That's the word I'm looking. So did that answer the question? If that did not answer the question, oh, thank you very much. Yeah. Right now, we're just doing a level set, right? Just getting into this whole what it is that we're doing, right? And it gets complicated and deep really, really quick. All right. So there's the implementation of protections, including perhaps we are going to make someone's job in conjunction with various automated machine stuff, but we're going to make someone's job to be reading all of the various news articles that are related to cybersecurity. I'm blanking on some of the names, but Cisco has a feed, and you can read different things, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Thales, we have. Oh, I'm just blanking on the names, but in any case, that could be someone's job, just going through and reading all the news reports and providing advice and analysis. That would be part of protect. All right. Now, the detect process, continuous monitoring. This is one of the areas where Stellar Cyber, this is one of our functions that you have installed the agents on, like the EDR agents on the workstations and on the servers. You're ingesting logs from your firewalls, and now they need to be monitored. The big issue with monitoring all that data is there's a lot of data. And this is where bringing in sort of advanced, let's compare it to 2005, bringing in the kind of artificial intelligence, machine learning, whichever term you want to use, bringing that in to try and find the needles in the haystack. This is where we are bringing in a lot of expertise from our PhDs, security experts, machine learning experts. This is an area where we are bringing a lot of value, because back in the old days, as we'll talk about, it was a very manual process that individual humans had to look at every single log record and kind of remember what they had seen before. So this is detect area is something we are bringing into the picture. And also the respond mechanism, trying to make that easier and faster for SOC analysts. You see something fishy, can you just click a button and make a temporary firewall rule? Or do you now need to contact the networking team or the firewall team to create a rule to block this thing? And how long does that process take? What is the friction there? Part of respond, I'm thinking more from a networking perspective because that is my background, but we're helping a lot with the various mitigations. And then communications, we do have mechanisms of clicking buttons and opening tickets and cases. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the key point with respond is you've made some plans, time to follow. And then the recover phase, now that you have, to borrow a medical metaphor, stop the bleeding, hopefully, you stopped something on a firewall, or you contained a host that looked like it was having issues. Now you have to go in and do some of that other forensic stuff, that starts getting, that is the recover phase. But there is also, in the recover phase, again, communications, requirements that we communicate to our potentially impacted users, impacted customers. This is all a part of this larger framework, larger process that Stellar Cyber is a part of. And quite frankly, there's not one tool that can do it all. Communications, probably going to be email, but email isn't going to, provide protection or detection. One other area where we can help with on an ongoing basis, because this is a continuous improvement model, is we do asset discovery and user discovery to help feed into an asset management process or a user management process. Also to help in the respond piece. We'll talk a little bit about that. But in my opinion, respond and detect these are the big areas that we're helping with and helping our customers deal with. But we also, with the identify piece in terms of what are we going to do next. All right. So one example of working through this kind of framework, a zero trust architecture, which quite frankly, in my opinion, is an area where we can really help a lot, especially with our XDR kill chain. A zero trust architecture is a much bigger plan than, we're going to build some sensors and connect into the Stellar Cyber data processor. The core aspects of a zero trust architecture is one, multi-factor authentication. We have been hearing it for 20 years. 2FA, or heck, even 3FA, according to all the movies, for the really secure stuff. But multi-factor authentication, implementing the principle of least privileged access, functionally critical, may have proven crucial in a very recent Okta-related exploit. But another key piece is microsegmentation. And this enables enforcement of least privilege access. Not every machine can reach every other machine. And notice I put in orange continuous monitoring, because the continuous monitoring piece is the part Stellar Cyber can really help you with. There is the concept of the attacker's dilemma. And many of you have likely heard of the defender's dilemma from 20 years ago about how, defenders have to be perfect every time, but attackers just have to get through once. But a zero trust architecture helps you flip that, okay? Where, all right, we are not going to pretend that the wall and moat are our only defenses against cyber attacks. Rather, we are going to have microsegmentation, and users are going to have least privileged access. And now we can watch if anyone tries to go beyond their privileges or explore to other areas. And this is a foundation of our XDR kill chain, where, that initial attack comes in and, all right, I pick on Bob a lot. Bob, Alice, Bob, and Eve, Bob clicks the phishing email, and now Bob's workstation is compromised. But Bob doesn't have that much access to very many systems. So now the attacker has to shift things and start exploring the overall network and maybe find some other thing that they can, connect to. And they have to keep doing this over and over again. And now the attacker has to be perfect, because at any step, they make a mistake during exploration, they make a mistake during propagation, we'll see them. And that is what the zero trust architecture helps shift the focus. It does require continuous monitoring, but this can be a way for us to deal with the security concerns. And these are the ways our industry have invented to deal with the cybersecurity risks. So the steps, if you want to know, and I am not an expert on zero trust architecture. I'm very familiar with it. Not very. I am familiar with it, but the general process, and hey, notice this is also a continuous improvement process. So one of the first steps is we have to identify sensitive assets, and then we have to do some mapping of what's supposed to be appropriate. We have to figure out what the microsegments are. We have to design policies. This whole thing is actually this step in the NIST framework, identify. There's a little bit going through protect, right? But in any case. And then where Stellar Cyber can help you is for that continuous monitoring, mapping various indicators that something's going on with the machine learning and the rest of it to help you stop an attack earlier in the chain, or even if it's in exploration. Like, the earlier we can stop an attack and stop the attackers from achieving their objectives, their exfiltration and impact objectives, the better. The less expensive it is to our organizations. And this is what, as an industry, we are about, and what Stellar Cyber is implementing and providing value to our customers. All right, a little bit more, kind of background level setting. The security incident workflow, if there is a security incident in a very, very big picture, obviously there's this preparation, which is, all right, back in 2005, 2004, in many organizations, from what I saw, preparation was the kind of ignored step. I did a lot of firewall support back then, a lot of network stuff. I was focused on protocols and firewalls and whatnot. So perhaps it has gotten better. However, it still feels to me like preparation might be an area where many organizations, just based on the news reports, perhaps skimp on. The reality is there is no product that you buy and now you're secure. And everything from ISC to Gartner have been reporting that truth for at least a decade. Now, detection and analysis, and then the containment piece, this is where Stellar Cyber can come in and help these parts of the workflow. And we'll talk a little bit about what post-incident activity is going to look like. These are going to be other resources. These are going to be, depending on the nature of the incident, these are the forensics analysis of hard disks or of memory heaps on servers to try and figure out exactly what the vulnerability was, that kind of activity, or just, oh, look, we stopped it early. That one host, did we stop it early enough? All right, we're going to restore from backup. So the security incident workflow in very, very big blocks. So let's talk about the security incident workflow in the format of text. Obviously, collecting, and we have automated analysis. Automated analysis, 10 years ago, these were essentially grep statements or SQL statements to try and look at different things pieced together. Fortunately, today, we have machine learning techniques where they are appropriate to correlate different pieces of information from different places and provide some additional level of automation to the entire process. There will be a manual process, a validation and manual analysis. Even if we implement triage rules, like I see this, I see that, firewall rule block for the next 5 hours. At some point, a human will need to come in and take a look what happened. If only because whoever got their firewall blocked, or whoever got blocked on the firewall, rather, are now being quite upset. In a practical sense, we might create some kind of case tracking element to help us coordinate with different organizations. That might be our primary respond case, or we may be in charge of going out and collecting the hard disks in order to start gathering evidence for future lawsuits. So a lot of this respond piece is beyond the additional response. It starts getting a little deeper than a 5-minute window. The incident process should also have a documentation and improvement process because we are a continual improvement type of process. And granted, this doesn't happen every 5 minutes or whatnot, but it is a part of the SOC operations workflow. Now, I will take this moment to mention another workflow that I am certain is important to many of you, which is this whole compliance piece. To our knowledge, nothing bad has happened. How do we show that? And there is the whole collecting piece and reporting piece. Analyzing for compliance includes both providing the reports, something that, say, a junior SOC analyst can do. I ran the report. Also, does the report really say what we think it does? And this is going to require someone with much more domain-specific information. This is going to require someone with Windows servers expertise or your firewall expertise, as well as networking expertise. And all of this is always going to come back to improvement of the overall, how do we do this faster, more efficiently, and more accurately? This goal, the classic engineering joke, good, fast, cheap, choose two, but we're always striving to get all three. All right. And I will say one reason I am talking about this is to give us a perspective for the rest of the course, right? There's a lot more going on, and where does Stellar Cyber fit within all of these activities that a security operations center needs to do? And it gets complicated really quick. We're not going to make Jira for managing cases across teams, right? All right, no questions. I'll move right along. So one thing to talk about is the various roles in a traditional SOC. And we have to remember that this did come from a military framework, well over 10 years old, even older. And the first level was to triage. We didn't have machine learning, and so we trained junior SOC analysts how to look at different kinds of logs. Potentially different analysts had different levels of expertise. This person knew firewall logs, that person knew Windows logs, that person knew Linux server logs. And their job was to take this flood of data coming in and make it presentable for analysis by the level 2. And quite frankly, if there was an easy remediation, if it was really, really obvious, then potentially the level 2 would just handle it. Potentially the level 2 analyst might be an expert in multiple areas. And so these different things they gotten triaged in, now they could look at the bigger picture. Remember, this is, before we had much in the way of machine learning. But then there was this level 3 team, the really, what's his name? These were the super spies of the SOC team. These were the people that had the experience across many of the different platforms. And sometimes they were also the incident response team. Sometimes there was a separate incident response team. It really had to do with the size and scale of the overall organization. And these were the people who handled the hard cases. And these were the people that did that. I personally have never learned how to take a physical hard drive and use a electron microscope to read the different bits on the hard drive. And there are people that can do that. And in some organizations, these people are a part of the forensics team. But another part of being this level 3 SOC in terms of continuous improvement was to feed in various improvements to reporting and to feed in various automation with those grep and SQL statements in order to improve the alert rules that made the level 1 and the level 2 more efficient and effective. So this is what we were dealing with, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Another challenge we're facing is the challenge of definitions. Different organizations and different standard bodies would define different things differently or define the same thing with different words. For instance, one definition of an event is anything we observe. Event is value neutral. Every log is an event. Every report from a user, if we're dealing with physical security, is an event. And then they differentiated a security event was an event that related to some aspect of a security function. Oh, someone tried to get into the base with a bad ID. Was it because it expired? Was it fraud? An adverse event had negative consequences. But how do you know beforehand if that event had negative consequences, right? And an incident was a violation or some immediate threat. Again, how do you know? Or another group, perhaps making the same kinds of observations I'm making, they decided that a log event, all right, log events are log events, but an event is actually some kind of change in the pattern. So now it's not every log record, but rather if we see some change in the pattern. So an event might be found in some report over time. And we can only see an event after a day. If we compare today with yesterday, or we compare today with the averages for the past week. And a lot of the people who had this definition of an event as a change versus a log message, these were traditional SIEM vendors. And the analysts, especially those level 3s, would write the rules that actually detected those patterns. And they had to decide what is usual and what is a change, and then write some kind of query that represented that. And for them, an incident was a security-related event. So now we have to have analysts comb through every change in raw pattern to try and figure out if it's security-related versus, maybe we had a power supply failure, right? But if that power supply failure happened on a firewall, that was a security event. This is a problem, and I'm going to tell you how we at Stellar Cyber are shifting things a little bit. First off, these are being defined in many ways from the top down. The managers want to define, okay, what is a security event? It's a violation. All right, how do we know it's a violation? Because we saw an adverse event. We at Stellar Cyber are going to start from the ground up. So for us, a raw event is going to be an individual record in one of our indexes other than the alert index, the traffic index, the syslog index, everything we learned in 101, all those different indexes. A raw event is a single entity about, oh, this host talked to that host on port 443, or the firewall sent a admin account login event. These are raw events. Now, just so you know, or a quick refresher from the 101, remember that our various sensors and our various connectors are feeding in metadata, details about assets, users, other entities are being extracted from that metadata. And then when that metadata is transformed into a raw event, we are also having enrichment from what we learned before. Oh, I know that host name. That's IP address such and such. I saw that 3 minutes ago. All right, I can enrich that into the process. So there's a little more going on here. Just please consult your Stellar Cyber 101. All right, so once we have the raw events, some of these raw events will be extracted based on what the security analyst, red team, machine learning people at Stellar Cyber, like, that's an interesting value, and we're going to hold on to that. That's going to be something we want to pay attention to. So we're starting from the ground up, and we're calling them raw events. We're trying to distinguish from some of those other definitions we had a moment ago. The signals and raw events are fed through the various rules and machine learning algorithms to generate an alert. And this is one of the things we are providing. But it is this combination of signals and raw events that trigger alerts. So some examples, we have a DNS tunneling anomaly. feeding in a variety of raw events to trigger that anomaly. Raw events over an extended period of time. Uncommon application anomaly. Actually, I take that back. I misspoke a moment ago. DNS tunneling anomaly. This is a supervised machine learning. So it is looking at potentially a few raw events and seeing if they match the supervised machine learning model. The uncommon application anomaly, this is looking at the machine learning model has built up a pattern of what is common and therefore can determine what is uncommon. Again, this advanced correlation over time of these various raw events that are in the indexes. Now there are alerts in Stellar Cyber 4 onward. We also have alerts being generated into incidents, where an incident is a group of alerts that are associated in terms of entities by graph machine learning. So as a quick reminder, raw events and signals